Just to say thank you to Brunel University, who have hosted this event and have also supported it through funding and administration. And thank you to Senna and Jenny Danoop, who've been really sort of working to kind of bring these events together. The other organisation I'd like to thank is CNWL NHS Foundation Trust, which is the NHS Trust, also collaborating and supporting on both the content, the design, and the promotion of these events. As we prepare to explore the profound impact of musicality in times of crisis and its roles in transforming our ways of being together, I just wanted to pause to honour the memory of Benjamin Zephaniah, our esteemed colleague at Brunel, who recently passed away. Zephaniah was more than just a poet and a musician. He was also a powerful voice that articulated the experiences and perspectives of people from diverse backgrounds, especially those who are often unheard. So his presence kind of is very with us today, and kind of resonates with the themes of this particular seminar, but also with the kind of, when we think about social change and what we aspire to see today, the kind of changes we need, the social changes we need. So he's written a lot on the subject of social change, environmental change, Generation X, really thinking about the next generations and how they're going to approach life, culture, and the future. And I think that's kind of where we are today. You know, we're really trying to make a positive impact on society and social change. So his words, like the kind of music, have the power to heal, unite, inspire. And in this spirit, I really want to commence these seminars. So welcome, as I've said, to our seminar today. So the third one in the series, a series of 9 seminars in total. So today we're going to immerse ourselves in a symphony, a possibility that music creates in times of recovery and healing. So we'll explore how music, across cultures, digital platforms, contributes to social recovery and well-being in post-crisis scenarios, and even during crisis. You're going to have a lot of different perspectives on this. This will be really interesting. So crisis encompasses events. You know, when we first designed the seminar series, we kind of wanted to think about what crisis means. And of course, it's quite a complex subject. It encompasses events that really shake the foundations of societies. So we're thinking about wars and natural disasters, pandemics, sort of socio-political upheavals, but even the sort of more subtle generational environmental changes, the things we don't notice from day to day, that have huge impacts, such as kind of climate change. So these crises leave both visible and invisible scars on communities and individuals, disrupting lives and challenging cultural norms. In their aftermath, music emerges as a potent tool for healing and unity. And that's really what we're going to be hearing about. It transcends language barriers, the usual kind of linguistic language barriers, soothes emotional wounds, rebuilds communal bonds. And, you know, we talked a lot about the arts in a paper that I co-published, co-authored with Efrat Hus. So we discussed how arts, including music, uses symbolic and spatial elements to articulate a stress regulation continuum. So essentially how we begin to get into spaces where we can express difficult emotions, stress, pain, struggle, but also about how we can find soothing spaces, things really to find safe, secure kind of relations. And we discussed you know, how the symbolic and spatial elements help to articulate that kind of regulation more vividly than words, embodying multiple levels of experience. So in our work, we described how this allows for more nuanced understanding of community crises beyond binary notions of and weakness or stress and regulation. There's something much more on a continuum. I also wanted to mention renowned philosopher Elizabeth Gross, who offers profound insights into the essence and impact of music. She views music not just as an art form, but as a mode of becoming, an expression of life itself, where sound and emotion kind of intermingle, and kind of evolve together. So this is particularly relevant in post-crisis sort of healing, therapy, change. So I want to introduce our speaker today. So Gavriel is a London-based music therapist, lecturer, sound artist,
Hello, good evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the organizers. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here and to listen to everyone speak tonight. So with your permission, I'm going to start off with a story, actually. So I'll take you back to 2012 when I was a camp counselor on a summer camp. And I was running an activity for a group of about 13-year-olds. And just the activity was to go around in a circle and everyone would play a song that was very, very meaningful to them. And they could share about why it was meaningful as well. It was just a nice activity to do one evening. And we went around in a circle and these 13-year-olds picked songs like, you know, Coldplay and Adele, and it was all very emotional and soppy, and you know, it was, quite cute. And then it gets to one person's chance, and he says, "Yeah, I'd like to play that song, Wake Me Up by Avicii." So I think, oh gosh, he's completely missed the point over here. This is like totally going to kill the vibe. You know, that's like a, you know, a dance tune. It's like quite a banger. So I thought, oh. But then he explained why. He explained why he picked that song, and he said that for the last few years, this was him and his dad's song, and they had listened to this song all the time while driving, traveling, playing football, cooking, whatever it might be. And that this song really encapsulated his relationship with his dad. And he had just been informed earlier that day that his dad had been diagnosed with cancer and was in hospital and likely not going to make it, and that he'd be leaving the camp later that day. And then with that context in mind, we listened to the song as a group. And by the end of the song, we were all crying. So just showing the context. So with that story in mind, let's move on to the presentation. Can go to the next slide, thank you. So I'm going to attempt to answer this question: how can musical expressions across different cultures and digital platforms contribute to social recovery and well-being in post-crisis scenarios? And I'm going to take a kind of psychosocial and very theoretical approach to this question. So perhaps not the most innovative musical examples, but hopefully quite an intellectual answer, which will hopefully inform the rest of the speakers tonight and their projects as well. And the overall argument that I'm going to make is that by incorporating diverse musical expressions from various cultures, music can foster a sense of unity and understanding among communities and within individuals in post-crisis scenarios. So in order to get to this argument, I'm going to look at, firstly, what is crisis from a psychoanalytic perspective, and then the role of art, especially music, in that, the crisis in terms of geographical displacement, so maybe geographical displacement or even internal displacement, the role that digital platforms play in this, and then ending off with a case study. Excellent. Okay, so beginning with this question, what is crisis? This is such a broad term, and I'm going to try and answer this from a Lacanian perspective, which is almost impossible to do in a short amount of time, but we're going to try anyway. So essentially, very briefly, in a nutshell, Lacan has born and exist in a state of what he calls lack, and we're craving a psychic wholeness, but we'll never actually be able to achieve it. That we exist in a reality where we're constantly desiring certain things, but never actually achieving them. And our entire reality is actually a construction of symbolic and linguistic episodes and manifestations that are essentially defenses against avoiding what he calls the real, capital R, which is a existential terror, a place where we recognize or experience the dread of existence, and namely the dread that we will never fully understand ourselves, and we will never be able to commute that lack of understanding to other people, and no one will ever be able to understand us for who we are. So that's the real, that's this petrifying, traumatic experience of existence. And our entire lives are constructed around these symbolic imaginations that try and avoid this confrontation with the real. And then crisis is a kind of disruption of our imagined, created reality. So he actually calls it a rupture in reality. He calls traumatic experiences a rupture in reality. So everything that we've created to exist in our lives is suddenly smashed to pieces and it brings about a confrontation with the real, which is essentially traumatic and petrifying. So the ensuing deep sense of dread, anxiety, hopelessness that comes about after our reality is shattered in a crisis situation. I'm also going to be talking about crisis in terms of displacement, as I've already mentioned, geographically and internally or emotionally, and the kind of disconnection that ensues from that. So disconnection with other people, feeling distant, misunderstood by other people, and also internally, maybe misunderstanding parts of yourself and feeling disconnected with yourself, and essentially resulting in this severe case of loneliness. Next slide. So there's this beautiful quote by Soloveitchik, who says that in terms of loneliness, in his book, The Lonely Man of Faith, he says that the companionship which we seek is not to be found in the activity of the institutionalized, soulless political community. Rather, our quest is for a new kind of fellowship, which one finds in the existential community. There, not only hands are joined, but experiences as well. There, one hears the rhythmic beat of hearts starved for existential companionship. There, one lonely soul finds another soul tormented by loneliness and solitude, yet unqualifiedly committed. So in this existential state of loneliness, it's not really satisfying the need for connection, but there's some kind of recognition that other people are in this state of loneliness. And that can be somewhat satisfying in a way, maybe lessening, softening our confrontation with the real, with this dark entity of loneliness. Okay, so hold that in mind. Next slide, please. And now we've looked at crisis, going to look a little bit at what art is, or what the role of music is in particular. So in art, hopefully good art, the artist reaches down into themselves, into the deepest parts of their unconscious minds, and finds an internal experience of what it means to be human and their experience of reality, and then manifests that through their medium into an object outside of themselves, the artwork, in this case, music. Then the second person, the audience, is able to listen to this third object which has been created and use it as a bridging point between them and the initial composer. So they are able to, through this third object, either access the same point in themselves that the original artist manifested it from, or potentially project whatever they're experiencing onto this third object. So the music is kind of acting as a bridge in the center of the Venn diagram between the artist and audience, so connecting the two. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable because they were vulnerable. And through this, we feel less alone and thus better able to cope with adversity because we feel that we are deeply understood in some sense. And although the real cannot be expressed, music offers a unique way to approach it, to kind of, again, soften our confrontation with the real. Music offers a way for, as Soloveitchik would say, one lonely soul to find another soul tormented by loneliness and solitude and coexist together. Next slide. So this beautiful quote by Daniel Levinson, who says that the power of art is that it can connect us to one another and to larger truths about what it means to be alive and what it means to be human. Kind of summing that up. So something that might be thinking about now is this idea of music acting as a transitional object. So Winnicott defines this transitional object as an object that symbolizes safety and helps one to cope with being separated from that safety. So essentially, the teddy bear is the perfect example. The primary caregiver leaves the infant over there, leaves the room, but before they leave, they give the infant a teddy bear, and the infant attaches themselves to the teddy bear because they feel safe. The teddy bear acts as a transitional object between the primary caregiver and the infant. So in a state of crisis where this existential terror has been catalyzed, and we're experiencing this confrontation with the real, music can function as a comforting symbol in those times, and we've all experienced this in our own ways, I'm sure, of how music can actually help in those times. So it's a coping mechanism because we're not actually identifying, we're not allowing ourselves to go deep into that existential terror that's been created when our reality has been shattered. What we're doing instead is using music as a symbolic tool to actually reorganize our reality, our imagined lives. But so it's a coping mechanism, it's a defense, but a healthy one nonetheless, because it's a constructive outlet for emotions that might otherwise be repressed in post-crisis scenarios. Next slide. So now also thinking about the role of music in geographical crisis. So I've mentioned now that crisis can take place either geographically or emotionally, but a lot of crises these days, I mean, think of war, refugees, these kind of things, it involves the physical displacement of people. And Edward Said, who's written a lot about exiles and excommunication, has said that an exile is this experience of solitude outside of the group. So really a feeling of separation from the rest of your group. And music has the power to tap into these archetypal themes that resonate across cultures. So it might be that as the artist digs down into themselves, they find something about the experience of being a human. And halfway across the world, someone might feel the exact same experience because it's an archetypal theme. And because that's experienced expressed in this third object, the two are able to connect to each other through that. So now enter the digital platform, and we might see how the digital platforms can allow us to access those different cultures. Next slide. So I'm talking obviously mainly about streaming platforms for now, but thinking about the disconnect between genre and space. In the past, it's always been that in order to experience music, I'm saying before recordings, in order to experience music, you had to be there with the musicians to hear it. But when recording came about, you could experience music separate from where it was performed. But now, even more so, you can experience any music anywhere across the world. And there's a massive amount of genres right now. I think in 2016, there was something like 1,800 genres on Spotify. And now there's 6,000 genres. I think they just crossed the 6,000 genre mark. So 6,000 different means for people to tap into certain things that they might be feeling and resonate with. So this means things for audiences. One, digital platforms provide a means for individuals to access music that resonates with their emotional experience. And then on the other side, for artists, digital platforms provide a means for individuals to distribute, but more importantly, express their music. So a platform for them to be heard and actually express that which they're experiencing for other people to hear, recognize, and resonate with. This empowerment through artistic expression can be a tool for rebuilding identity and agency in the aftermath of crises. So I want to talk now just very, very briefly about a little project that I did back in 2019 alongside a Zimbabwean photographer, artist. And this was just as I moved to the country, and not to diminish any of the crises that we might be thinking about, but just in my very own kind of way, experiencing a kind of shift in identity and trying to correlate my South African identity with this new British UK identity alongside this artist. And the two of us, via cross modality, kind of found a fusion of sound and images that took hopefully some of the best ideas and cultural aspects from both sides and fused them together. And this quote that I had in my mind the whole time was that much of the exile's life is taken up with compensating for disorienting loss by creating a new world to rule. So again, not disorienting loss that I was experiencing, but some kind of shift in identity, and thinking about how people who are physically, geographically displaced might collate some of their old identity and their old culture with the new culture to create a new world to rule. which is essentially a new culture, which is a combination of both old and new, and something that has their identity in it. Next slide. And that creation leads to something that I'm going to call a healthy kind of diversity. So, as we've said, for the displaced person, the digital platform can provide a sense of personal grounding, which gives them access to their transitional object. The digital platform allows them to connect to that third object, the transitional object. And this infuses people with a sense of identity, allowing them to be themselves rather than having to mold themselves around a new expected identity. So the creation of culture in a different situation will be able to allows a person to tap into their original home identity, and therefore bring the best of themselves, bring a part of their original self to the new situation. So this kind of healthy diversity is what brings about understanding between peoples as well as innovation. So it's healthy in the sense that maybe normal diversity, just because there's a group of diverse people around, doesn't mean that it's healthy. What I'm saying is that everyone is able to bring the best of themselves, a part of who they are and where they come from, and contribute to this new diverse framework. And that allows for innovation as well as a healthy mentality between people and individually. It enables people to be sure of themselves and may reduce the need for social defenses that may be triggered otherwise. I want to just talk about briefly a case study in my work in an inpatient adult male psychiatric ward, where the group aims are to offer a safe space for emotional and creative expression and relate to others as part of a group. So this happened a few months ago, where these two patients on the ward, who I've anonymized their names, one being Shehzad, who had been on the ward for quite a while, and he requested to play a song off of his phone, a Kurdish song from his homeland that reminded of his home. So he played the song, he read the lyrics to this slow, melancholic song. He began tearing up. He was reading the translated lyrics to the rest of the group. And it was an extremely emotional song. The lyrics were absolutely beautiful, and it was very emotional. And as he started playing the song, another patient who was new to the ward and had experienced a lot of trauma, he wasn't in a very healthy state, his eyes kind of lit up, and he looked at this person, and his English was also quite limited, but he recognized that the song was from, they were from the same place. And as they started kind of connecting on this, and almost immediately he began crying. It was too overwhelming. After that initial stage of excitement, it became overwhelming, and he started crying. And Shehzad went over to him, and he put his arm around him, and he said, "I'm with you. I'm with you." And it was just this moment of true connection of the two of them coming together, in a truly traumatic situation. The two of them were both refugees. They had landed up in the UK, and then eventually in a mental health unit. And they were really confronting the real. They were confronting the darkest parts of their entire reality as they had known it had been shattered. But now, in this space, when all seemed kind of hopeless, they were able to share and tap into this Bluetooth speaker, sound coming out of a Bluetooth speaker that was able to connect them. Kalim eventually, he put his hands in his head, he left the room, he said, "I can't do this." But then afterwards, he came back before the end of the group, and he said to the whole group, he said, "Thank you for showing solidarity to my people." So the fact that, we were just listening, we weren't doing anything, but for him, this was a massive moment, emotion of reaching out and showing solidarity to him and his entire people. And as the group ended, the two kind of shook and held each other's hands, tears in their eyes, and hugged it out. And it was an incredibly emotional experience. Next slide. So thinking about how this creation of culture and resonance over the two of them created a group identity in this new multi-ethnic society, and how the digital platform allowed the two patients immediate access to their unconscious content, which related to their homes and their previous trauma. This subsequently involved their integration, especially Kalim's integration onto the ward as he was a new patient, because he felt that he had an ally, and as well, shortly after both of them were discharged, and hopefully their integration into society as well. So we see how, just as was the case in my story time at the beginning with the 13-year-old child, that music takes on another level of depth in a state of crisis, and it softens the confrontation with the real. Slide. So to end off, this has been very theoretical and potentially intellectual. And we have to ask the question, so what? What are we getting from this? What are we talking about? What are we going to do about this? You know, it's maybe just some ideas. So I'm going to offer two things. The first is, as creative practitioners and creative educators, I believe that we have a responsibility to imbue this understanding in musicians and ourselves. So through experiential and practical means, theoretical and experiential means, I feel that we as creative practitioners and educators should imbue this understanding of the power of the transformational power that music has to connect people within ourselves and within our students. And you know, at the moment, this is not the priority in music education, in music education courses. It's the priority is to raise musicians, budding, you know, social media kind of people who will be famous, essentially. But I'm suggesting that instead of that, we develop a more kind of introspective approach to the creative arts, and encourage students and ourselves and colleagues to look within ourselves and use our medium to truly express what it means to be a human and our deepest experiences of reality, and manifest that outwardly so that other people can tap into that, making this a central value of making the central value of music as a tool for social healing. We have a responsibility to instill this perspective in the next generation of musicians so that it is consciously at the forefront of the creative arts, rather than passively unconscious as it may have been in the past. And secondly and lastly, as clinicians, well, of course, we need to respect our clients' cultural heritage. But secondly, through the use of digital platforms, we should be helping them to provide access to their cultural heritage and encouraging them to utilize the potential of this medium. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and appreciate all you guys, and looking forward to anything else.